Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Unfound Now. This is a roughly monthly program that I started last summer, where I will comment and try to do an analysis and try to teach all of you some of the ways we look at disappearances, relatively new disappearances here at Unfound, when there are conversations between myself and my assistants behind the scenes, because although we do the episodes every Friday, in many ways we are no different than all of you, in that when a disappearance makes regional news or national news, we talk about it amongst ourselves. And doing Unfound, once again, besides the teaching aspects, allows us to cover some of these newer disappearances that we don't cover on the regular Friday episodes because of our rule that we do not do these in-depth weekly analysis of older disappearances until they are a year old. If you're not aware of that, that is the rule here at Unfound, that a disappearance must be at least a year old before we will cover it on one of our Friday episodes. There are reasons for that I've talked about many times before. So doing Unfound Now roughly every month gives us a chance to not only give attention to a newer disappearance, but also analyze it and then maybe teach the public about how we, as people who cover these disappearances and read about these disappearances and study them every day, how we look at them from our point of view. So this week, or this month, or whatever you want to call it, today is January 3rd, by the way, 2021. I want to talk about the disappearance of Jason Landry. He's a 21-year-old, and if you see me looking off to my left, I'm looking at my notes. He's a 21-year-old. He was a student at Texas State in San Marcos, Texas, and he was driving home, presumably for Christmas break, to Siena, Texas, which is what you might call a suburb of Houston. I will be doing a map analysis in the middle of this video just to show you the route, and I will show you some things that I observed just looking at that route. But you will see in that analysis that this drive is about 3 hours, a little over 3 hours, if you're following the speed limit. And it happened December 13th, 2020, or very early of December 14th, where it seems that he wrecked near a town called Lulling, Texas, which would have been roughly about an hour into his trip. Now, the issue with this disappearance is that where the car was found was not on the route he should have been taking, which is another mystery. Not just Jason being missing, but why was he on that road at that time? But his car was found on a dirt road northeast of Lulling, Texas, and it looked like the vehicle had been wrecked. The police say that it looks like it was a one-car wreck. Does not look like he hit another car. There was no paint or anything from another vehicle on Jason's vehicle. There were no other parts from some other car that were just lying there in the road. It looks like this was a one-car accident. Of course, I guess you could say that maybe he got run off the road and another car never touched him. I guess that's possible. But the vehicle had crashed. It was in a ditch. And somebody who lives in that area drove by and recognized it and called it in. Now, some of the information about what was found in the car, what catches my eye is that the media reports say that the vehicle was locked, but the keys were in it. That's a neat trick, especially with cars these days. With, of course, remote keyless entry. What it means is that if that is true, that the car was locked but the keys were in it, somebody got out of the vehicle and then actually hit on the driver's door. Of course, there's that door lock button. Hit the door lock button, then shut the door, and on purpose left the keys in the car, essentially locking himself or herself, however you want to look at this, if you're in conspiracy land regarding this, somebody locked that vehicle with the keys in it on purpose. You have to think about that. His phone and wallet were found in the car, and there was a small amount of blood. I'm not sure if that was in the car or outside of the car. And as we all know, being that this took place about 3 weeks ago, we know how long DNA is taking to get tested these days. So that has not been tested yet. It is presumed that it is Jason's blood, but that doesn't mean it is. And it said it was a small amount, so I'm not sure how much that means. Anyway, now one of the most recent developments in this, just within the last week, is that there was a backpack that was found of Jason's, whether inside the car or outside the car, and narcotics were found on it, and I will talk about that a little bit later after I do the map analysis. On December 26th, so roughly 2 weeks after Jason disappeared, and his vehicle was found there, EquiSearch, which is based in Texas, so that was convenient. They showed up, did a lot of searches in the area, of course, found nothing. There was a pond that was nearby there that was drained. Nothing was found in that. And after a few days, Texas did all they could, and I think it's just a wait-and-see situation now, where they looked around the area and they just ran out of places to look for Jason. As of January 3rd, which is today where I'm doing this video, there's no news on the cell phone info and no ping information. Of course, we know that the phone was found in the vehicle, but what we don't know is who he talked to last, who he texted last, things like that, which, as you know, can be very, very important in disappearances, especially the very, very recent ones. So we have to keep that in mind. It very well may be that he spoke to nobody once he got in his car and was driving back, and texted nobody. It's very possible, but I really have not read anything or heard anything either way. This disappearance reminds me of many that we've covered on Unfound, but I will just name a few of them. And I think what stands out to me, and just naming just these four, is even though these are situations where a car was left behind, where a person was driving somewhere, the facts of all of these disappearances are vastly different. And that's what makes, put him into a category of somebody who's driving somewhere and the car is left and the person is missing. Just because that is similar doesn't mean the entire disappearance is similar. Surely not. But some of those are Eric Alvarado, a young man who lived in Texas, but his car was found in Arkansas. Robbie Hurt from Virginia. You should know in that disappearance, though, near where his truck was found, some remains have been found. No news as of yet as to whether they're Robbie's remains or not. Mandy Stokes, who disappeared, was in Oakland, California, or is it San Francisco? I think it was Oakland. And her car was found sitting in traffic in Oakland. And then Travis Murrow, a disappearance we covered out of Oklahoma, where he was driving from his home to see a woman he knew, and his truck ended up abandoned on a route. It's kind of similar to Jason's in that it's hard to understand what he was doing on that particular route, because it would not have been a road that Travis should have been taking to see this woman who everybody presumes he was going to see. So probably of all of those, probably Travis's is the most similar to Jason's, but still, I'm not sure any of those four really, really line up very well with Jason's, except for the fact that all these people were driving somewhere, and the cars ended up on the side of the road, and these people were missing. So let me now go to the map analysis, and then I will come back to do just some commenting and to make some points what I've observed regarding Jason's disappearance. Okay, here is the map portion of this Unfound Now on the disappearance of Jason Landry. What you are looking at is a general map of how you would go from where he was in San Marcos over to Siena, Texas, which is, as you can see, a suburb of Houston. And you can see right there in the middle of the page, or the middle of the screen, that takes a little over 3 hours, I guess, if you're following the speed limit, to get from point A to point B. Of course, once again, going from west to east. Not crazy. I think that if Jason was driving home, as many people suspect, of course, there are some theories out there that maybe something else was going on. In fact, to the point that maybe it wasn't Jason, who was driving the car. Maybe something happened back over here in San Marcos on campus at his job, something like that. I don't know if there's any facts to support that or not support that. But overall, though, I don't think it's crazy to think that he decided at 11 o'clock to leave school if he was going back for Christmas break, and to get home at 2 in the morning or something like that. I know myself, having driven from Florida to Pennsylvania several times, sometimes I'll leave at 7 in the evening. Just depends, and then drive all night. It's a 17-hour drive. So, as a person who has driven a lot across the United States a few times, I don't think it's crazy to say that Jason left roughly when he did, and believing that he would get home at around 2 in the morning. And even if his parents didn't know if he was showing up or not, maybe it was going to be a surprise. I've done that to my parents a few times. So let's go down, though, and take a real close look at the area in question where his car was found. And I know there's been some discrepancies, I would say, regarding where the car was found and where it was. But I come to you with a lot of assuredness that up here in this area, Salt Flat Road, roughly 2365 Salt Flat Road, is where his car was found. Now, as you can see, this is well off the accepted route from San Marcos, going through Lulling, and then getting on the 10 to go east. For some reason, the car ended up here when he should have been down here somewhere. Now, I will admit, sorry, just hit the tripod, that when I first started looking at this and saw Salt Flat Road, I was thinking he was down here. Because Salt Flat Road, there's a Salt Lake Road right there. And I was thinking, okay, well, maybe he missed a turn. He came down here, started driving straight, and then somehow got off on that road. But obviously, that is not what happened. His car was found up here north of the route, not south of the route, and very much off the route. There's been talk about Waze, the phone app, and I'll talk a little bit about that afterwards. But I don't know, as a person who's had Waze on his phone for about 6 years, it does make mistakes. There's no doubt about it. But to believe it would make something, a mistake this large, and him not realize it, stretches my imagination, especially since this is not that it's not a very complex route, making a lot of different twists and turns. Is this going to work with me or not? It's just, you get in here to Lulling, you make a right, and you make a left, and you get on the 10. And I'm sure he's made this drive more than once. So, to believe that his app could throw him off, I'll talk about that in a little bit. But what's more obvious to me, and this is something that I don't know if anybody has, I haven't seen it pointed out anywhere. Maybe some people have realized it, but I haven't read it anywhere, is that,
You have to look at this. He would be coming into town from the west, coming into Lulling. Now, what happens, we don't know what was going on. If we knew what happened, we could just go solve this disappearance right now. But look at this. This Route 80 turns into East Austin Street. Well, look at this. If you go through that intersection, if you don't make the right to get down to Route 183, well, if you go straight through here, you can see how that road keeps going straight. This is once again where he would have been coming from the left side of the screen. And if he just goes right through that intersection, guess what? If he keeps following that road and it bends going up like in a northeast direction, guess where it ends up? Keep following that road. Route 128, 128, 128, 128, 128, 128. Guess where it ends up? Route 128 goes right to where his car was found wrecked. So, now why would he not make that turn? Why would he get so far off? How could he miss a turn on a route that he's probably, driven before? I'll talk about that after this video. But that's what caught my eye looking at the map, is that if you come into town and you don't make this turn right there, the road actually is the road that his car was eventually found on. It's just way... Now, I know what the blue route says. Well, that's the most efficient route. But if he went through that intersection right in downtown Lulling, he's on the road. It's just in the wrong direction. Even though this road looks like it's, way out here northeast of town. I know I keep zooming in and zooming out. But even though it's way northeast of town, you're thinking, well, that must be some separate road. It's not. It just comes right here and it wraps around. It goes right up here and right up to the location where his car wrecked. So I want you to think about that as I continue this video. Now, as far as the pond that was drained, I'm not sure which one it was. We have a pond, it looks like right here. We got one right here. We got some over here. I don't know which one was drained. But whoever, if it was on private property, I commend whoever's private property that is to allow them to do that. We need more private property owners like that for these disappearances. But so even though the road is a gravel road and it seems like it's out of nowhere, there is a logical, although non-understandable way to get here. Even though it's gravel and it seems like it's way out of town, it's actually, this 128 is just an extension of the route that he was taking from school into Lulling. But for some reason, he didn't make that right-hand turn to go down to the I-10. All right, now back to the commentary part of this video.
Okay, and we're back from me doing that map analysis. Just want to make three major points regarding just the general idea of disappearances and how they apply to Jason's, or possibly apply to Jason's disappearance. Number one, I call it the Natasha Richardson effect. If you don't know who she is, she was a well-known actress. She was the wife of Liam Neeson. He's probably better known than she is, especially with the movies he's done in like the last 10 years. But she was in Canada skiing and hit her head. And she thought she was fine. And then a couple hours later, she started getting severe headaches. And she went into a coma and ended up dying. And there's nothing that anybody could do. Probably if they had taken her to the hospital right when she had the accident, she might have been okay. But what had happened? She hit her head really hard. The brain was bleeding. Nobody knew that. It started swelling, and it ended up really harming her, and she ended up dying from that. But this is a perfect example of how you can have an injury and not realize it till much later. And given that Jason was in a car wreck, we don't know. There's no news of whether they decided whether he was wearing his seatbelt or not. I think these days everybody just takes for granted that people wear their seatbelts. But I read a lot of car wreck news about people who weren't wearing their seatbelts. So, and even so, you could still have a head injury, or at least a concussion, something like that, even if you are wearing your seatbelt. And it's also not clear to me with Jason's disappearance. I'm thinking that the airbags went off, but I don't know. But so we have to be open to that. Is it possible that Jason had some sort of injury, head injury, didn't realize it at the time, might have had a concussion, didn't know what he was doing, got out of his car, locked it with the keys in it, started walking away, once again not realizing what was going on, and then walked off, and then at some point this injury that he had totally overtook him. Now, I realize searches were done in the area, but searches are not perfect. So we must consider the Natasha Richardson effect. We have an injury, everything seems fine, and then a couple hours later, everything gets bad really fast. The only issue I would say with Natasha Richardson's injury and death is that I've never found anything that said after she had this head injury that she lost sense of reality and who she was and what she was doing. In fact, that she didn't was the reason that nobody got her to the hospital. Had she shown amnesia or concussion symptoms, I think they would have. But that she seemed like she was fine is the reason I think nobody took her to the hospital right away. So, might be something there comparable to Jason's disappearance. Maybe not. The second part, number 2, people do walk off. I know parents don't like to hear this. Children of missing people don't like to hear this. Brothers and sisters of missing people don't like to hear this. But people do walk off. And I'm not sure how much. I can tell you that on Unfound, I take for granted that a vast majority of the disappearances that are covered on the program are murders. They do involve foul play. I'd say 75% of them, in my opinion. But maybe there's a higher percentage of people walking off than we realize. The problem is we don't realize they're walk-offs until they're solved. So, the cars being left behind empty is very common in disappearances. Very, very, very common. Not sure if it's the most common scenario, but it's common. So even though Jason's disappearance seems very strange, whatever that means, actually the scenario of him driving from one place to another and his car being on the side of the road and him being missing, when it comes to disappearances, that scenario is fairly common. And these things happen for a whole bunch of different reasons. Sometimes these people are found, and sometimes they're not. But we must remember that sometimes people do plan their own disappearances. It is a thing. How common is it? Nobody knows that. Number 3, searches. I've already talked about with Texas EquiSearch, and this is nothing against them. I think they do fantastic work. But just like everything else, nothing's perfect. Dogs aren't perfect. Lie detector tests aren't perfect. A lot of things when it comes to disappearances are not perfect. They are not DNA, where it's like 1 in a quadrillion chance that it's not the person whose DNA has been found. The case that I like to bring up, the disappearance that I always mention, it's not one that was covered on Unfound, but I do know a lot about it because I did get to speak to this young man's parents at one point, Eric Pratt, who disappeared in Colorado, where he allegedly, at least at the time allegedly, walked off with a gun after going outside with his fiancée to take the garbage out. She came back inside. He didn't. There was a lot of suspicion regarding his disappearance. A lot of searches were done around that area. Eric was never found. And this gun and he were still missing. And a lot of people were afraid, well, did he walk off and commit suicide? But being that he wasn't found, people were thinking, well, he might be still alive, or maybe it was foul play. Well, they did another search a couple years after that in the same exact areas that they had searched before, and they did find him. Now, how he was missed the first time around, I don't know. I wasn't there. But ultimately, it was decided that Eric did walk off, and he shot himself, and the gun was found with his body. And his parents and everybody else who really cared about Eric believe those results. They believe that he was a very troubled young man, and that's what happened that particular night. Now, why did he decide to do it that night? We're never going to know that. But the real point of this is searches. Very good searches were done in Eric's case. A lot of people showed up. A lot of area was covered. Missed him. Missed his remains the first time. The second time he wasn't missed. So we have to remember when it comes to theories and what could have happened to Jason Landry, it's all based on the idea, well, he wasn't found in the area, so it must be suspicious, it must be foul play, maybe he got carjacked back at his school, etc. But that's not quite accurate to do because many times searches miss remains. It's common. It's very common. Nothing against the people who do that. They will even recognize that what they're doing can be hit and miss. It depends on the terrain. It depends on the other people, how many people you get. Who are those people? Are they motivated? Depends on, did it snow? Is it just a desert, or is it really thick forest? There's so many variables when it comes to searches that it's hard to guarantee anything. They need to be done, but they are certainly not foolproof. So let's take a look at some theories that I've read about regarding Jason's disappearance, and allow me just to comment on them. Just once again, from how we analyze disappearances at Unfound. I mentioned Waze. I'm very familiar with the Waze app, and it is not a perfect app. I can tell you that sometimes Waze acts really goofy. I can tell you that just when I go south on Gulf Boulevard and make a left to go in Bel Air Bluffs, go over the bridge there, for some reason over in that area, if I try to set my Waze up right in there, it just does some really weird things in that particular area. I don't know why. It's happened way more than once. But what's confusing to me is Waze has been mentioned a lot in Jason's disappearance, but are we even sure that he was using that? I realize we have his phone. His phone has been found, but is there any proof that he was actually using that app? That's what confuses me. I also think I can say about Waze is that even though it's made mistakes for me, that it's never misled me as much as it seems it might have misled Jason in this circumstance. And of course, that if Waze misled him, it still would not explain why he ended up wrecking. And moreover, being that he had made this drive before, would he not realize that his driving app was taking him the wrong direction? Now, very well could be there was a wreck somewhere that night, and I think that's worth looking into that might have caused Waze to point him off in a different direction. But I cannot see any reason that Waze would have pointed him in that direction. If you are unfamiliar with Waze, I really don't have time to go into it. But it's a crowdsourcing app for driving from place to place. I urge you to look it up. It's a great app. If you don't have it, you should get it on your phone. It's free. But I just don't believe into the idea. I'm not buying totally into the idea that it was Waze that caused him to go off on the road that he was on, simply because he had been in that area before and would not have gone that direction, especially to the point of being on some gravel or dirt road. The wreck, could he have fallen asleep? Was it a DUI? Maybe he was on that road and missed a deer. All of those are possible. The problem is we still don't know why he was up in that area. I can certainly believe any of those. Driving at midnight, you could fall asleep. Maybe he did do a little drinking before he left, or those narcotics, which I'll talk about in a second. Maybe he did take something of a narcotic nature that caused him to doze off at the wheel. Or maybe there was a deer in the middle of the road and he swerved to miss it, and that's what happened, and he wrecked. The deer is long gone. We'll never know. The only way you can know that if somebody swerved to miss a deer is if they tried to swerve and miss the deer and hit it. So there's a lot of possibilities of why that wreck could have happened, and we may not know why it happened until Jason's found. Now, somebody said that there's been the idea that, well, he wrecked his car for some reason, and then he was walking and got picked up. And that person who picked him up killed him or something. The odds of that happening are so remote. So remote. I know this comes up a lot in the Mara Murray disappearance. It's not a theory I believe in her disappearance either, by the way. It is so unlikely that that's what happened, that he would be in a wreck and then get picked up by somebody who harmed him. Bad luck on top of bad luck. The odds of both of those being put together are just so remote that it's a theory, but I would not put any money in it. Next, he was walking after this wreck and trying to walk for help, and somebody hit him with their car by accident, then picked him up. Once again, this is even more unlikely. Totally unlikely. Not impossible. But once again, it is not a theory that people may write about it, but I don't know if they'd put any of their own money in it. Drug deal gone bad, and this, I think this theory has gotten a lot more traction, given that narcotics were found in his bag. I don't think we should jump to conclusions regarding these narcotics. They may have been his. They may have been prescribed for him. We don't know the kind of medical issues that Jason might have had. Hey, he was 21, so I guess it's, 21, you're much less likely to have a lot of health problems than you are at 81. But of course we know a lot of 21-year-olds have diabetes or MS, or it could even be ADD or something like that. We just don't know. We don't know enough about Jason the person to make a decision whether narcotics being in his bag makes sense or it doesn't make sense. And I don't think anybody should jump to any conclusions regarding this. I think that's wrong. Okay? Now, if you're going to tell me that there were prescriptions in his bag and the names are for other people, then okay, we can start talking about that. But until that is a fact, I'm not sure what to make of narcotics being in his bag. I did look up the technical version of narcotics. I know that's funny. And it's usually considered to be connected to opiates, opioids, those brand of drugs that are pain relievers that we also know can be highly addictive. Maybe he had a prescription for them. Maybe he had some sort of sports injury or something. We just don't know. Just because somebody has opioids on himself or herself does not make it illegal. Those are legal drugs, and people take them every day, and most people do not become addicted to them. Unfortunately, some people do. So I hope all of you are not going to jump to conclusions regarding that. That is wrong. I even have to say, why release that info in the first place before releasing info on the phone? The phone information, who he last talked to, and texting, etc., is way more important than whether there were narcotics in his backpack or not. And I just find it wrong that drug deal gone bad would even pop up, and that the narcotics would even be mentioned. Okay? If you're going to do that, then you need to do it within the context of a much deeper analysis of Jason the person, and if anything was going on in his life where he would have had narcotics for legal reasons. Because when you say narcotics, everybody all automatically thinks illegal. That's just the way the public is. Trust me, I know. But on top of that, if this was some sort of drug deal gone bad, would not have the drug dealers taken the narcotics? Would they really just leave them there? There's even been the theory that Jason wasn't in the car, that something happened on campus, he got carjacked, and the actual disappearance took place in San Marcos and not in Lulling, and it was somebody else driving the car. So then the person just happened to drive in the same direction that Jason would have been driving home, an hour east. Once again, I realized people love to theorize and write these theories, and they feel very smart about them, but I don't think the people who write these theories would put their own money into them. Of course, people do get carjacked. That happens. It's horrible. But why would a carjacker then hijack the car, wreck it out in the middle of nowhere? Why not just park it somewhere? Drive it until it's out of gas and abandon it somewhere. Why park it out in the middle of nowhere? I don't know. It's not a theory that I personally am buying into at all, but I know people are going to talk about it. My observations, first thing that bothers me is the car was locked, if that is true, but the keys were in it. And if we're to believe that Jason was driving the car, then only he could have locked the car with the keys in it. And to me, that shows that maybe he was not in his right mind after the wreck. Second, and number two, why would he miss that turn? I diagrammed it in the map. All you have to do is go through the town, and if you miss the turn to go south, you wrap around there, and you end up where Jason's wrecked car was. What would cause him to miss that turn? Whether he was using Waze or anything else. He left important items behind. His phone, his wallet, if he walked off. What this all tells me is that Jason was in a diminished capacity even before he had his wreck. Now, it might have something to do with the narcotics. Or it might have had something to do that he left school at 11 o'clock and wrecked at midnight or sometime after that, an hour into his drive. I think it's clear to me that Jason was in a diminished capacity. I think that that's the only observation that satisfies what we know. Car locked, keys in it, missed a turn, left important items behind when walking off. So I guess what I'm saying here is that I'm inclined to believe, unfortunately, probably Jason is in the area. Of course, that would probably mean that he is deceased, and that's sad. But we can never underestimate how far people are going to walk after something like that. Walk and walk and walk. And it may seem like in a search covering 2 miles in any direction from a wreck might make sense, but it very well could be that a person could walk farther than that. And we also can't rule out the idea that the searches were done, but somebody just were within feet of his remains and didn't see them. But I think you put all those observations together, I think it leads to the most likely scenario that for some reason Jason was in a diminished capacity as he was driving home, and something happened. Now, my recommendations, just in case, got to check how he's doing at school. There's just too many stories of young people who say they're going to school and getting good grades when they're not going to school, and they've been lying to a lot of people about going to class and everything. I think that this is at least something worth looking into, even though I happen to believe that Jason was in his car. It's disappearances and, frankly, suicides can be connected to kids who say they're going to school but aren't, and they're afraid that their family is going to find out soon. That is a thing. Number two, we need a full understanding of the drugs in that backpack. Why was he taking them, and what are the side effects, and were they his? That's another recommendation. Surely the police are looking into that, and I hope that his family is helping them. Number three, any private land not searched. I think more and more, as we covered more and more disappearances on Unfound, we find out that although searches claim to be thorough, after the fact, you find out that searchers didn't get permission to go on this private land, that private land. And I would like to hear a little bit more about, was private land near the car wreck searched? How many people said yes? How many people said no? I think that's important because my guess is rarely do search parties get permission to go on all the private land in a particular area. Some landowners are very giving and understanding, and some aren't. So I think we, the public, need to have a better understanding of that, before we can start analyzing the search and how good it was. Because you have to remember something. Any piece of land that wasn't searched in that area could be the place where Jason is. And I keep coming back to the Crystal Morrison disappearance that we covered on Unfound in 2017. It turns out she was right near the area where she was last seen. Area didn't get searched because the landowner at the time wouldn't allow it. And then number 4, ways. If he was using it, I don't know if there's any proof one way or the other, but if he was using it, can anybody else report that there were malfunctions of it in the area of Lulling, Texas that night? That is probably something that could easily be searched. And were there any wrecks in the area? Of course, the state police, the county, the sheriff's office could certainly be helpful in reporting on any wrecks that were in the Lulling, Texas area that might have, if Jason was using Waze, might have told him to go a certain way and where he ended up. I'm being honest with you, I doubt that. I think they're going to find that Waze had nothing to do with it. I think they're going to find that there were no wrecks in the area that would have sent Jason off in another direction. But just to be sure, you got to look into that. So that's my observations. I think overall what I'm saying is I'm inclined to believe that Jason Landry was in his car. I think that he was suffering some sort of mental issue even before he wrecked, and continued to have something happening to him after he wrecked. I think that there are enough facts to show that. But I hope, of course, that he's still alive and he's found very soon. Thing is, it's been 3 weeks now. But so those are my observations, and I thank you for watching this episode of Unfound Now.